Looking for a guaranteed way to create content that resonates with your audience? Start a podcast. Interview your ideal clients and let them choose the topic of the interview. Because if your ideal clients care about the topic, there's a good chance the rest of your audience will care about it too. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to the B2B Growth Show, a podcast dedicated to helping B2B executives achieve explosive growth. Whether you're looking for techniques and strategies or tools and resources, you've come to the right place. I'm Jonathan Green.
And I'm James Carberry.
Let's get into the show.
Welcome back to the B2B Growth Show. We are here today with Laura Guenther. She's the VP of Marketing at SimpleLegal. Laura, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, James. How about yourself?
I am fantastic. So, Laura, we're going to be talking today really about how to be successful in demand gen. You've got three ingredients, so to speak, for doing successful demand generation campaigns. This is going to be a topic that I think our listeners are going to get a ton of value from, just looking over the outline, and this is going to be packed with a ton of actionable advice. But before we get into that, I'd love for listeners to understand just a little bit of context about where you're coming from. So tell us about SimpleLegal and what you guys are up to over there.
So SimpleLegal is legal operations software that acts as a system of record for corporate legal departments. So we work with general counsel and legal operations teams to help them better track and manage their legal projects, their vendors, expenses, budgets, and so on. So kind of to relate it to the folks listening to this podcast, it's very similar to how us as marketers use a HubSpot, a Marketo, or a Pardot for all of our marketing campaigns, or how Salesforce is a system of record for all sales activity.
Wonderful. All right. So Laura, I want to dive right in because we've got a lot of stuff that we're going to be talking about. As we were talking offline, you said that demand gen is like being a marionette. I think you explaining that, particularly in light of everybody talking about ABM and there's all these kind of buzzwords tied, that are somehow tied to demand gen, but you calling it, demand gen being like a marionette, I think is very interesting. Explain that for us a bit, and then we're going to dive into these three ingredients that you laid out.
Yeah, sure. So, it's kind of program management, project management. You're working with a lot of different folks. You're trying to get everyone coordinated. You have a lot of moving pieces. You've got your digital folks trying to work with PR. You're coordinating with field and sales development. You're ensuring that the C-level executives and likely your sales leaders are bought into your campaign. And you're really just making sure that everything's getting done so you can see success. Your point about ABM, in my opinion, yes, a buzzword for sure, and something that I deeply think is an important thing to keep in mind. But it's also not just, it's a mindset. It's not a dedicated channel or team. And I think all great marketers, we've been doing this since the beginning. Of course, we're going to treat certain accounts a bit different because of their size and because of where they fit on our ICP. But when I think about a truly successful demand gen campaign, I break that into three different parts, being, kind of the pre-execution or the strategy portion, the actual execution of the campaign, and then the follow-up behind it. And I think it's important to recognize that the follow-up and the post-campaign strategy is just important as the execution. So I see and want to make sure that all of us as demand gen leaders are aware of that.
I love it. So this first piece that we're going to talk about, Laura, is knowing who owns what and knowing specifically what you're measuring. I think this being, the first piece of this three-part puzzle. Can you expand on this idea for us?
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of as I mentioned, with a lot of moving parts and several members that you're trying to coordinate with, it's important that they understand what they actually need to deliver and in what timeline. So there isn't any gray area. So kind of a small piece of that one, but the bigger portion is what you're measuring. So what are the KPIs that you want to track? Whether it's an event or it's an email campaign, you have to decide what it is that you'd like to measure in order to show success. So, it could be new names, it could be pipeline influence, it could be website visits, you name it. And generally, this is going to be dependent on the type of campaign that you're running. One thing that I would also mention, it's not just metrics for the marketing department. It's important to think about the metrics outside of your team as well. So working with other leaders in the organization to ensure that there's numbers that are being measured. And this could include what your inbound sales development reps or SDRs are tasked with. And then finally, not really the fun part, but making sure it's documented. So helping keep everyone on the same page. One thing that I do feel very strongly about is hiring marketing ops early. So make sure either you hire them early or whoever you hire, they have some analytics chops. I can't tell you how much easier it's been for us here to be able to try new campaigns and see what's working and what isn't, because, of course, not every campaign is going to be a success, as much as we all hope it will be.
Yeah.
And we're able to quickly pivot because we have a strong foundation and process to be able to identify those things.
Love it. Was that something, I would imagine this is a lesson that you've learned from not doing it this way. Can you speak to kind of what happens when you don't take this approach?
Sure. So, I mean, if you're going to fall flat of your goals, it's going to be difficult to be able to show the success. And I'll talk about it more as well in one of the other kind of ingredients I've called out. But the fact that if you can't actually measure on what you want to, for lack of a better word, measure, you're unable to show your impact to the pipeline and to the organization.
All right. The second piece that we're going to talk about, Laura, is around alignment. Specifically just making sure that sales and marketing are aligned in a few different ways. Can you expand on this for us?
Yeah, definitely. It's important to make sure that the sales and marketing teams are aligned, but that really does start with leadership. So if your VPs aren't getting along, there's a chance that is going to trickle down, that feeling's going to trickle down to other members of the organization, and that's never a good thing. At kind of a process level, it's important that everyone's talking the same language. So let's say I'm using a terminology of MQLs and my VP of sales is using something, she says leads. That in and of itself kind of shows that we aren't aligned and that things might get missed. So we're not tracking the same stages and the same, conversion rates and things. It's going to be confusing and difficult for our teams to be able to understand what they should be driving towards. Another area is your tech stack, and this is a huge one for me. I've spent a lot of time figuring out workarounds, integrating different technologies. I've been a Salesforce admin for 7 years, done some consulting, and have spent a lot of time playing with data. I'm kind of a geek with that stuff, but I do recommend making sure that your tech stack is very heavily aligned. There's a lot of new solutions and technologies out there today that we didn't have 10 years ago, and there's so many that both sales and marketing can use, but there's still solutions that maybe only marketing users need access to, and only sales users need access to another thing. So a few questions to kind of ask yourself would be, do the solutions talk to each other? Kind of seems like a no-brainer, but worth bringing up. And I don't think that it needs to be a one-to-one sync. I don't think that it needs to be bidirectional or that you have all of the data in both systems, but key information should be able to be passed back and forth. And so if you're asking yourself, or you're thinking about your tech stack right now and your solutions, there's not a native integration, then there might be a workaround. And there's a lot of great consultants that I've worked with to support those kind of unique situations. But another thing I would caution is as you're building out your tech stack, to think about that and the fact that not all software is created equal, and truly not all software integrations are created equal.
Yeah. And one thing that I'm sure you're well aware of, I'm not sure how much you guys use it at SimpleLegal, Laura, but something that I've heard people getting a lot of benefit out of is a tool called Zapier that essentially allows you to integrate, tool to tool that if it doesn't have a baked in integration into it, it's likely that Zapier does have an integration for it. So I'm in total agreement, both on, making sure that leadership is aligned, making sure that your tech stack is aligned. The third piece of this that we're going to talk about, Laura, is this idea that you need to stop trying to do it all. Expand on this idea.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to run a lot of campaigns. Marketing in general will, not just demand gen campaigns. And with all of the, especially in B2B marketing, there's a big push for doing all of these integrated campaigns, and we want them all to be successful. And for each one we do we want it to be better than the last one, but we can't try to fix all of the conversion weights at once, or we're going to kill ourselves trying. Instead, it's important to start with just one. So maybe that is let's kind of, to take an easy example, your email campaigns. If we let's work on our open rates, or let's work on our click-through rates. Pick one of those and work on it, figure out how to impact it, and then you can move on to the next one. So, one example that also kind of a real life example for me is during some of our events. We work very hard to schedule on-site events, as most companies do. When they're sponsoring, you get access to a great list of people, and you have these key stakeholders in one spot. So scheduling those demos on site and getting that face-to-face time is really important. However, after the event, we kind of take a step back. And again, this is making sure that you're thinking about all three portions of a demand gen campaign. And looking and seeing of those demos we did, how many of them converted to opportunities. And when that number doesn't look so good, how do you kind of take a step back and pick that as the metric you want to work on for next time? And so one thing that we did in order to impact that metric in particular is modifying our qualification for scheduling those demos and making sure that the next time around we're saving our top sales reps time at those events and reserving that for more qualified demos that we know will convert into opportunities.
It's fantastic, Laura. That you're clearly you clearly know what you're doing over there. Yeah, I've gotten a ton of value from this conversation. I know our listeners are going to pull a lot of takeaways from this. If there's somebody they want to either connect with you directly or they want to learn more about SimpleLegal, what's the best way for them to go about doing that?
Sure. So, our website, SimpleLegal.com, is a great place to start if you're interested in learning more. But feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn at just Laura Guenther, Guenther, or you can reach out via email at laura@simplelegal.com.
Love it. Wonderful, Laura. Well, thank you so much for your time today. This has been fantastic, and I really appreciate it.
Thanks, James.
There are lots of ways to build a community, and we've chosen to build the B2B growth community through this podcast. But because of the way podcasts work, it's really hard to engage with our listeners. And without engagement, it's tough to build a great community. So here's what we've decided to do. We're organizing small dinners across the country with our listeners and guests. No sales pitches, no agenda, just great conversations with like-minded people. We'll talk business, we'll talk family, we'll talk goals and dreams. We'll build friendships. So if you'd like to be a part of a B2B growth dinner in a city near you, go to b2bgrowthdinners.com. That's b2bgrowthdinners.com. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.